What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about an early 2024 movie release that I actually saw the trailer for a couple of times while I was at the theater, and it looked interesting enough for me to check out. And for me, everybody talks about how January is a garbage month for movies. February often isn't much better. And so far, with the exception of Dune 2, and I really love Drive Away Dolls, there hasn't been a ton of incredible movies released this year. But this one caught my eye. I thought the trailer was interesting enough to check out, and I'm going to talk about the movie I.S.S. with you today. I.S.S. is directed by Gabriela Cowperthwaite. Tensions flare in the near future aboard the International Space Station as a conflict breaks out on Earth. U.S. and Russian astronauts receives orders from the ground. Take control of the I.S.S. by any means necessary. So, as I said, I was really interested to check this movie out. I thought the trailer looked interesting enough, and I was hopeful that even if this movie wasn't great, that it was at least going to be entertaining. And what I will say about this movie is it's a really great concept that I think is explored in a way that is very interesting, but the execution is not great. And I think a lot of the performances in this are lackluster. The third act kind of loses traction completely to where the entire film feels like you've wasted a lot of time. And I left overall feeling unsatisfied, but I'll talk about it in detail when I get into the movie as a whole. So at the beginning of the film, we're introduced to Dr. Kira Foster, who is going to the International Space Station, and she's going up there for the first time. And when she gets on board, she's introduced to a wide array of people working on the ship. There's Americans and there are Russians working up there, and they're all working on different tasks aboard the International Space Station, and they're all incredibly friendly to one another. And we see in the first 20 minutes of the film them spending a lot of time together. There's a lot of conversations, and you can see they all genuinely like each other as people. And as the film goes on, they have this giant lookout space where they can see the Earth, and they go up there and look the first time. Well, one day they get up, something is going on with their antenna, and they're not able to communicate back at home, and so one of them has to go outside of the ship to go fix the antenna. When they get outside of the ship, they see that there has been all these bombings on Earth, and that there's something going on where the United States is covered in flames, and they're horrified. They have no idea what's going on, and amidst all that, they finally get their communications back online, and the United States to the Americans on the ship, and the Russians to the Russians on the ship, both send messages that the Russians have bombed the United States of America, and that both parties are supposed to take control of the International Space Station at any means necessary. And so the entire film is us seeing these characters, and are they willing to abandon these friendships that they've created to create tension on board and fight for their country, or are they willing to question what they've been told in order to try to survive? So as I said, I thought this was a really interesting concept, but the execution is incredibly flawed. For starters, I will say the performances in this movie are all over the place. I think what's really interesting is early on when they're developing their chemistry, it's really natural, and I think they do a nice job, forming these characters in a way that you kind of understand their motivations, you can understand things about them. But as the film starts to develop and get more complex, some of the line delivery is really sloppy and comes across as incredibly cheesy when the movie is supposed to be very dramatic. And that kind of pulls you out of the film when you're watching someone deliver this line that is supposed to really stay with you and resonate with you, but that it just comes across as just really lame and corny. And so that kind of pulls you in and out of the movie as you're watching it, is that the performances are a little all over the place. The movie, for the most part, is pretty well shot. I really liked the environment. I think it was probably very difficult for these actors to shoot this movie where it feels like they're floating in zero gravity the entire time. And that part of the movie I really liked. The editing was all right. I feel like the way that the sound was used worked really well to create kind of a horrifying atmosphere when tension started to build. But I think what's the problem I have with this movie is, like I said, the concept is incredibly interesting because, being an American citizen, one of the things that you get used to being an American is this idea of forced nationalism, where you have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. You're taught from a very young age that America is the greatest place on earth, and that you have to love your country no matter what, and that having any sort of critiques or ideas against your country is a bad thing. And it's not. If you don't question leadership and you constantly just follow everything you're told blindly, the world is going to become a really awful place. And what I think is really fascinating about this movie is you get these characters who are taken away from their respective countries. They're in outer space, away from the confines of everything that they're told and the knowledge that they have, and that this conflict is happening back on the planet, and that immediately when your government contacts you, are you willing to strip away these relationships that you have created solely to serve your country blindly when you have no idea what is going on, when you have no knowledge of the nuance or anything that is happening when it comes to the conflict between these two countries? And I think that's really an interesting idea. But the problem with it is the execution is really sloppy. I think there's some scenes that pays off where you're seeing characters kind of question their loyalties or stay true to the cause, as certain people would say, for their country. And those scenes are really interesting, but towards the end, some of the conflicts feel like they come out of nowhere, and it just feels so unnatural. The movie has violent moments that just seem to come out of left field. Some of the characters' motivations are really just, you're asking yourself, why are they making these decisions? And I think if the movie was in the hands of a more established director or someone who has done these types of movies before, you could have had something really thought-provoking and compelling. But instead it ended up coming off as really campy, or like something you could just see on like the Sci-Fi Channel with a higher production budget. And that's really disappointing, because I do think that concept is really interesting, and it could have gone in a lot of different directions that would have been a lot more thoughtful and interesting. But instead I just left feeling incredibly unsatisfied. It wraps up relatively quickly in a way that didn't necessarily work for me, and that's unfortunate because I think this movie had a lot of potential. So have you seen I.S.S? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was not great. I think it had a lot of potential, but it unfortunately fell short for me in a lot of ways. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.